Okay, so good evening again, everyone.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Okay, Reverend Brown, you are hearing me. Wonderful. Welcome.
Yes,
It's
yes,
a pleasure to have you here to share with us on this very interesting topic and a topic that
yes.
definitely needs to be discussed. Sensitizing our children about
Mhm,
their sexuality and gender trends in the world. Before
mhm.
I hand over to you, I was given a profile, so I'd just like to read that
Go right
profile
ahead.
to introduce you to the persons who are.
Yes.
All right, so Helen Ann Brown has been a Christian since 1974 and
That's
has
longer than you have lived.
that is way longer than I have lived. And she has always delighted in working for the Lord. So after working in various ministry areas, she has settled on a multifaceted ministry based primarily in marginalized urban communities. She has merged training and experience in community development, urban youth work, social planning, social project development, and management with Christian ministry to develop a hybrid. This forms the backbone of Kairos network. I hope I pronounce it right.
Yes, you did.
Kairos
Perfect.
network's approach in its community and personal transformation work. Her foremost ministry expressions are in church planting, leadership development, and as a minister of the word. These are strongly directed at winning marginalized youth and other needy individuals. And she is the lead pastor of Kairos Network. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Reverend Helen
Oh
Ann.
my goodness. Helen Ann Brown is good. And
Helen
thank
Brown,
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank
Over
you.
to
Thank you.
you, Reverend Brown.
Right. And thanks for inviting me, by the way. I'm one of those presenters who love to present only in my own church. But it's a pleasure to be here nonetheless. Good. And the topic, as you said, it's a very, very modern topic. You would have had this topic 20 years ago, but it's a very important topic. And I hope I captured what you are looking for, right? I want to begin by saying, first of all, I really hope for a very interactive encounter rather than just staying here talking. Feel free at any point. I don't know if you have a moderator who could look at the waves. Feel free to wave and ask me a question, and I'll be quite prepared to stop what I'm doing to answer. All right. So let me begin by saying, one, thank God for intelligent churches. And increasingly, churches are becoming very intelligent, and we need to be intelligent. There's a time when, you just go up on the podium and you shout and you carry on and you come down. That cannot work in this particular age. So, saying that, I am going to begin just by looking at some of the contradictions in our culture that will better help us to know how do we deal with this topic. And here's our contradiction. On one hand, we are a very reticent culture when it comes to discussing sexuality. In other words, I'm sure if there's anybody, any little older persons here, they will tell you that when they were growing up, nobody not talk about nothing pertaining to sexuality. Anybody here who is like in my kind of age group and you really know some boy, nobody told you anything. Anybody at all? Or am I talking to all the 25s and under? Anybody?
We're familiar with it.
Pardon?
We're very familiar with that.
Very familiar. Girls will start seeing a period and nobody even tell them, if you're fortunate like me, they hand you a book and you go read the book. And so that's one side of our culture. We do not like to deal with anything pertaining to sexuality. I have to tell you how deep rooted it is. Even now, because I was raised in this culture, even now I'm a little queasy when it comes to discussing sexual issues. I'll watch my children just openly discuss stuff and my eyes are like, wow, I mean, they feel so free to discuss that. And that's an important thing to understand as a backdrop. to the question we're trying to answer here, or the information we're trying to glean. So that's a part of our culture. And here we are now faced with some very advanced sexuality topics, and we're going to have to deal with them, okay? The other side of this contradiction is that we have a very sexually explicit culture. So the average child in our country is exposed to what I call audio porn on a regular basis. It's in the buses, it's on the corner, and it's extremely explicit. It's the kind of information I would not have had as a child growing up. And in many households, people are watching movies and listening to stuff that children should not be exposed to. So this is a major contradiction. One hand, we're very queasy about these topics, and on the next hand, we are. It is just explicitly explicitly broadcast in our culture. And that's a real contradiction, and that's a big backdrop to what we have to face when we come to sexuality topics. Now, just to clarify the type of topic we're discussing today, and they are what I call the more advanced sexuality topics. So you have things like LGBTQ issues, transgenderism. We have questions that we wouldn't have had to ask maybe even 5 years ago. What is a woman? What's a girl? Questions like men wanting to participate in women's sports. So we have a blurring of the line of the sexes between men and women. This did not even exist as a topic a few years back. And so now we are faced not only as parents and families, but as church and as government and society to look at these issues. And we're trying to say, okay, how do we deal with this? Now, there's a huge fear in our society. And I don't think you're any different from us all, from me, from a major part of our society. One of the big fears of parents is that my son will ever come to me and say, Mommy, Daddy, I am a homosexual. Is there anybody who has ever imagined your child coming to you and saying that? Anybody? Nobody at Grace Missionary.
That's crossed my mind.
It has. And I mean, it has crossed my mind. I mean, what would it be? How would I react? I remember a lady gave me a call, and it's somebody I know, but she doesn't go to my church. She goes to another church. And she said, Pastor Brown, I faced a situation, and when I prayed about it, God said I should call you. She said, my son just came and told me, this is a boy at university, UWI, at that time. He said, my son just came and told me he's a homosexual, and that he has had this male friend for like maybe a year or a year and a half. I mean, her world fell because she raised her children like all of us try as Christians. We raised them in the church, and her husband is a Christian, and she tried to create a decent home for her kids. And here is it, the son is now coming out and saying, look, I'm a homosexual. That's really tough, guys. Tough, but real. And, that dealing with her case, it said a lot for me, to me, it informed me. I realized she found it easier to handle it than the son's father. The son's father found it very, very difficult to deal with it. He up to after maybe a year and a half to 2 years after, he had not yet come to himself. It's like that boy didn't exist. He couldn't face it. Mom faced it a little better. And I found a better part of my nature rising up when I spoke to this lady. And I said to her what I should say. I said, look, you can't afford to divorce yourself from your son. You can't afford to hate him. You can't afford to cut him off. You have to keep the bridges, and you have to keep loving him. That's the better part of my nature. But I'm a real Jamaican lady. And I've thought of times when I imagine some transgender issue. I'm being real. some transgender issue facing me, like some of these people you see on the TV coming into my country and trying, and I've actually felt extremely violent in my spirit. I felt, look here, if you try that with me, baby, I just deal with you, I finish you up. I said, don't come to Jamaica and try it. I'm being real, being very real. But when I was confronted with that counseling case, I did what was right. And I've behaved like a pastor, and I'm thanking God for that too, because the counsel I gave her is correct. So we have to face these realities that our children can come and give us that. Maybe I'm talking to somebody whose child has confronted with that, whose child has come to them already and said that, or who suspect or feel funny about how their child is behaving. I'm not asking you to identify yourself, because I know the culture I live in. I know how many parents periodically say to themselves, I wonder if. You might see little signs that you don't understand. And let me say here that maybe what you're looking at is just something that you don't understand, and there's nothing there. But it could be too that you're looking at an indicator of something that is marred in that individual's sexuality. And their parents, their kids are now adults. I've interfaced with those parents sometimes. Their kids are now adults, but they keep wondering. I wonder if some of their adult kids are unmarried. And they're saying, what? I wonder why. And there are some who are married, because a lot of people who are homosexuals and are bisexual or are dealing with these sexual issues, they marry. And they marry for various reasons as well. Sometimes to cover over the issues they're facing. All right? So this is reality we're looking at. And it's a real serious thing for us as parents in 2025. No, we have set all the stage of what we're looking at. So where do we go from here? How do we behave? And I already dealt with it to some extent. If we're faced with it in our family, we've raised our kids well, we've done everything we possibly can. And I want to look a little at exposure here, because we cannot isolate our children. Children, from they're very small, they go to school. And once you're mixing with the general public, that child is imbibing things from other families. I remember a little boy, he came and said, look, my friend said that his daddy, and he described oral sex. And this is a little boy, maybe about 6, 7. So once your child is exposed to other children, they're exposed to all types of sexual issues. And so we have to face it and say, how do we raise kids? How do we convey the information? Good. No, our kids are more informed than we were. Even if you're listening to me now and you're 30, 35, even 30, the kids who are now 6 and 7 are more informed than you were when you were 6 or 7. They're informed, as I said before, from the general society in which they have to live and move, the schools. And by the way, let me mention here, we limit this kind of explicit information that kids are exposed to lower income schools. No such thing. No such thing. You could send your child to the most expensive prep school in this country, and they're going to be as exposed to the issues as they would be to the one inhabited by the poorest persons in this country. It is all over the place. And I want to tell you, a lot of the rich folks, they do a lot of, more, what adjective should I give it? More shady, more weird and offsetting things than even some of the poor people, believe me. So this thing we're discussing has no social restrictions. It's moving through all the levels of society. And we need to know that. Now, because kids are now so informed, they're informed from music, they're informed from social media, they're informed from their friends, they're informed just by the visuals of society. Let me explain. A child will go into you carry the child into a gas station, those stores at the gas station, and a lot of things are advertised in little posters, and the child is seeing all of that. They sell condoms, they sell everything, and all the little adverts to put forward their wares are there. That child is seeing it. The child, there's just no way you can totally shield a child in this era in which we live. I don't know how anybody does it. You're driving behind a car, and at the back of the car, in the windshield or somewhere, on the car, there are little stickers, sexually explicit stickers. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. You're passing a light post and they're advertising a dance or some kind of musical event. And when you look at the language that is being used, it is so explicit. Your child is seeing it. So what are you going to do? How much can we really shield them? With that in mind, we have to learn to be honest with our kids. We have to tell them things. We have to include them in conversations. Now, I'm not saying you should give a child age inappropriate information. It has to be broken to the child at a level that you sense the child can digest it. But you must always remember that you are doing that within a given space where everything is explicit. The advertisement, everything is explicit. So if you become too reticent and you choose and you pick and you give them a little baby thing, a little synopsis that maybe you would have gotten as a child, that's not going to work. You're not going to call your kid and say, oh, come, let's talk about the birds and the bees. That child has probably been on social media, seeing stuff. So it means we too have to give clear information and early enough. The only way you can counteract the negative information that is being fed to your child is to give positive information, to speak the truth. That means early in the child's life, you have to define these terms that we're talking about today. The child has to know about what is transgenderism, what is LGBTQ, what is homosexuality. You can't tell me, oh, I'm waiting till the child is 15. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have to explain it. There's so much about sexuality. If we have some topics here, but those topics that we have here are a part of a lot of topics. So let's give an average family. Average family. Mom had a child before mom got married. Dad had 2 children with his former relationship. Then mom and dad come together and they have another child. Don't you think your child at some point of time is going to wonder, okay, so they're going to try and put 2 and 2 together. So we have to educate kids in terms of sexuality on a much broader plane. We can't just limit it and tell them a few pointers at 11 or 10. Children nowadays have to technology, understanding broken families, understanding step families, understanding that this man is your stepfather and that woman over there is your stepmother, and all the things surrounding it. And you might say, oh, but what does that have to do with the topic at hand? It has a lot to do with the topic at hand. I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but at risk of probably bringing up something now that I'd prefer to put later. One of the major causes of children, in my opinion, and I think I have a pretty informed opinion of people becoming sexually confused, homosexual, etc. Is sexually molestation when they are young. Causes. And a lot of our children are sexually molested. And guess what? I've reached a stage in my life, it's in my good church people. When I can look at anybody's face and say, oh, you would never do a thing like that. There are no limits. Grandfathers do it. Daddies do it, biological daddies. Stepfathers do it. Stepbrothers do it. Big brothers do it. Uncles do it. And then there's some women who do it as well. Hardcore reality. A lot of kids are being sexually molested. It's a very driven age sexually. And so they're so driven, it's not funny. You know, people, let me tell you, we don't do a lot of research on these things in Jamaica, unfortunately. But US statistics sometimes show 85% of men go on pornography. And guess what? You might say, no, but those are unsaved people. Those people don't know Jesus. Guess what? In the church, a few years ago, I was seeing things like 60% of men in the church are on pornography. And I dare say, I know there are people, it will be very odd if they're not people who are listening to me now and are struggling with pornography. It'll be very odd because let me see how many people are on this. There are 30 odd people, and statistically, there are some persons who are struggling with pornography. And pornography drives. So pornography drives people to do things that they should not do. And then kids grow up sexually confused. And I'm sharing that to say the whole sexuality education, they are not isolated topics. It is one big whole pot of stuff that is happening. So many people have been sexually molested. And there's a little thing I always tell people, you know, because I always tell them this little story. I was in a particular beauty salon some years back, upscale, by the way. And a lady came in and her daughter was in the vehicle. And I said, oh, your daughter's in the vehicle. And the conversation came, oh, yeah, she's on her device. So I said, have you put on anything on the device to block her? Oh, no, how responsible her daughter is. And my daughter shares everything with me. And her daughter is so responsible. I said, oh, my God, this lady's crazy. No, I was at a meeting with some of my church people recently. I said, look here. No parent can tell me that my child shares everything with me. Most of these issues of sexuality, it's later when the people are adult or 40-year-old before they can even face it themselves. So we have a sexually confused society. You know, one of the things as a pastor I've noticed, and I believe many pastors would probably notice, is that a lot of our young people begin to dress like boys, like girls. I started seeing some years ago, girls who they totally dress like boys. They wear boys' clothes, they do everything like boys. And after I thought it through, I remember let me just say this, one young girl recently, she declared herself a lesbian. And she wanted to dress like a boy, sorry. And my heart, as I remember, my heart just called for her. Jesus, help us, help her. But that girl has been heavily sexually molested. So sometimes when girls are sexually molested, they don't want to face their identity as women. You know, that's why some of them become transgender too. They don't want to be women. There's always a thing you can isolate somewhere in the child's development that push them away from their own sexuality, their own sexual identity, whether they're going to become transgender, homosexuals, or whatever. but it pushes them away, and the development that God intended doesn't happen, right? So, sad, but as church, we're facing a monstrous task, not just as families, but as church. And so, how do we do this? Well, I think one of the things we'll have to do, we have to make sure in our homes and families, by example, maleness and femaleness are distinct. Now, I don't want to convey a wrong information, piece of wrong information here. It doesn't mean mommy must always be washing the dishes and daddy reading the newspaper in front of the television. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm trying to convey. Because we know someone when the men say, yeah, man, yeah, man. That's not what I'm trying to do or to say. What I'm saying is that we have to make sure in our homes, a little boy knows he's a boy and a little girl knows she's a girl. And I have a daughter who now has children. She's now a mom, and she's married to her dad, and she's to her. So the kids have their mom and their dad, and I've tried to observe how she's doing it, right? Because my kids long grew up, right? They grew up gone. So I'm observing how she's doing it. Now, things which I would have said 15 to 20 years ago, I don't say it anymore. So I was one of those persons who would say, okay, so by the way, when you're ready for me to stop, please keep your timer on, right? And please indicate to me. I would have 20 years ago, I would have advocated, if a girl wants a truck, buy a truck for her. And if a boy wants a doll, so what? Sorry about that. So sorry. I would have said that 20 years ago. I don't say that no. I'm talking about my daughter and her husband and their family. Because of the present age, they have tried to how would I put it? They have tried to foster the femininity of their daughter and the masculinity of their son. Now, understand why they're doing it. Now, when I was growing up, I had brothers. My immediate siblings were brothers. I had sisters, but they were older. And I played cricket, and I shoot bird, and I did all the boy things, right? But I came out okay. But remember, I was growing up in a completely different world. Now, the world these kids are growing up from early, you have to begin to shape their femininity and their masculinity and to explain. So you don't want to tell a boy how pretty he is. You want a boy to know, use the right word. You're handsome, she's pretty. It might sound trivial, but it's very important that from very early you're molding the masculinity and the femininity of children because of the sexual confusion of the age in which we live. So, yes, girls will have careers, girls will be educated, boys will have careers, boys will be educated, girls can turn engineer, astronauts, boys can become anything as well. But still, within all of that, cultivate their femininity and their masculinity. No, I'm going to take a little aside to inject something here. Now, remember, stop me, please. Stop me when you want me to stop. In my church, I have come to realize that I have to focus on manhood training. Now, I'm talking about the adults now. Because imagine a scenario. If we're raising up kids in the church, in the family, but our men their manhood is very eroded. Can you understand why it might be a little hard for a child to develop a very strong image of manhood? In our society, manhood is so eroded, it's not funny. The average man has lost his sense of manhood. And you know, of course, I am a Christian and I believe in the supernatural, so I know Satan has done this over time, right? So we have had to, I remember we had a session, and I'm flowing from the child to the adult because there's no way you can isolate the child from the adult in this whole discussion. We had a few sessions recently when I focus with my both men and women. What is a man? What are the cardinal qualities that makes a man a man? And believe me if I tell you, if you sat down in a group right now and you pose that question, you might find that a lot of people cannot really answer it. What defines a man as a man as separate from a woman? And I'm not talking about the biology, no, the anatomy, not talking that. In their roles and their behavior. We had to stay isolated. And women, we are part of why, because we also don't understand our womanhood. Now, this is not a discussion for now, but just suffice to say, if we're having confused roles in adults, even adult Christians, then you can understand why it's going to be very difficult to raise kids that are very understanding of their sexual identity. And by the way, sexual identity is very central to our whole identity. If our sexual identity is marred, it damages us. Our sexual identity, our racial identity, and all the other identities which come together to make us who we are. So if it's ruined or marred or tarnished, it's going to mess us up big time. All right? So that's why it's important as adults to even have a very clear idea of what is manhood, who is really a man, who is really a woman. It is so essential. You can see for yourself when you turn on your TV that in the United States, they have struggled. You have boys masquerading as women, wanting to enter women's sports. Clear boys, come on now. And mothers and fathers enabling and supporting that. I'm going to just inject a little spirituality here. The reason why that is happening is because Satan is trying to mess with every boundary that God has set. God said it in Genesis, male and female created he them. And he said it more than once. He's very clear, he's very distinct. Satan decided, you know what? I'm going to confuse that. So the church then has the burden to teach our members, teach our families how to, again, fight the battle for our maleness and our femaleness. And it begins from the child is quite young. So in our church now, our Sunday schools, you know, when I was growing up, the big thing was flannel graph. It's flannel graph, they call it. These things that you paste on the story on it. But there, them things that done are gone with. Sunday schools, our lessons have to begin to reflect reality. Because, you know, some of the parents are failing to really do the sexuality education they should. Now, look at a church, this session is a good session. I can say that you're a good church because you are exposing your adults to what they need to know. But lots of churches don't do it, right? You're arming them with what they need to know. So you have to teach your families what do they go and do. But you also have to look at your Christian education department, and you are going to have to say, okay, we are going to have to augment what the family is doing. We're going to have to teach children about sexuality. Remember, you know, a church is made up of very avid, well-structured families and some weak families who they're not going to do anything the right way. And so you owe it to them to help their children to understand these things. I don't know about you, and I know a lot of churches, they see the only people they see themselves pastoring are the adults. But I pastor my children. You know, we have a strong children's population. They're all members of my church, very important members. And so we're always structuring for them. So the church has to do that then. We have to change our Sunday school so the topics reflect Bible, because this is Bible. You're going to teach them about Genesis. You're going to teach them that God created male and female. And you're going to put it in an age-appropriate way. When they begin to get a little bigger, you are going to have to, teenagers, they're very open, they understand stuff. You're going to have to put it to them. They're seeing it on social media anyway. So you are going to have to present it to them. Not like kids though, but having discussions that bring into focus all these very serious topics. Because they can listen to TikTok, they can open any podcast and listen to ungodly people spit it out. So we are going to have to counteract that information and to give them the right thing. So we now have to do it. So we have to reform our credit Christian education. We have to teach our families, and that's basically what we have to do. But the last thing I want to say is that we also not only owe it to our families and to our church, or natural families or church families, but we owe it to the society. As church, we owe it to society to help, because the kids are being affected. Nobody's teaching them. They're wild. I came across a case today, a young man who comes to my church, and he has been having emotional issues. And the person who directly deals with him said to me, it's one room, the mother, the stepfather, their 2 little girl, or 3 little girl, or whatever, and him, all on one bed, excuse me, or in a one room. Some people might sleep on the floor. What goes on? What goes on? So that's the society we live in. And it's more prevalent than we think. So what you're going to do, I pardon me as well, I'm closing now, to plug one of my favorite things. That one of the biggest reasons for crime and immorality in Jamaica is our land policy and our housing policy. Poor people need to live in proper housing, right? So church, I'm saying as church, we have to see our society, and we have to be willing to help our society. We can't just help our own family, our own church family, but the problem is out there too. And we have to begin to see how can we address it within our society, whether through advocacy or in our outreach. How do we work with people to help them to develop a knowledge of these sexual issues and how to avoid them? And I'd want to say here, and it's one of my favorite little sayings, mottos over many, many years, the life you save may be your own. Because when you get a porn-driven, sexually confused individual who was sexually molested as a child, he might rape your own child. So we become a victim of our own society. So when we're helping our society, we're helping ourselves. And, it sounds gruesome and terrible, but it's reality. And so now I'm going to stop here. If there's any question you may have or any comments you might want to make, feel free at this time to do so.
All right, so I will just read whatever is posted in the chat. If anybody would like to anybody has any questions or anything, you can raise your hands and I will identify you so you can open your mic to speak. There is one thing in the chat. It says from Brother Conrad Stewart. If girls can play basketball, should there be netball for boys? If females are lauded for breaking barriers and entering male-dominated fields, is a male seen as breaking barriers when he enters a female-dominated field?
All right. So there is male football, male netball. It does exist. However, somehow the boys don't latch onto it like the girls latch on to basketball, right? But it does exist. And yes, I agree that they should be free to enter different things. I see a lot of male nurses nowadays. But sometimes the choice to enter it is a choice of the male themselves. They don't seem to like entering the female-dominated areas, and so sometimes it's their own choice. It's not that anybody has anything against them doing it. I don't know if I answered your question, sir, but I tell the truth, a lot of parents are scared and they're scared because of the age we live in. So if your son come and say, boy, mommy, think I want to turn a nurse or what, daddy? I tell the truth, and no for you, they'll say, boy, you know, I'm nothing else you can't turn besides that. Boys coming up. Let's face it, we might react that way. But
All right, so Brother Conrad,
yes,
I'm not sure if that answers your question or if you have
I'm
another
not hearing for some reason.
Are you able to hear?
I don't know why I'm not hearing. Let me see.
Are you hearing now?
Yes, I'm hearing now. Yeah.
Okay, understand. So Brother Conrad says his question is answered, and Uncle Lindley
Mm.
said there is a Jamaican netball team.
Yes,
So
man.
yeah, man. So I think what Uncle Conrad was trying to say is that when women enter into male-dominated field, they are kind of encouraged and congratulated when they do so. For example, IT, the STEM, and whatever. But on the flip side, now when men enter into women-dominated field, they don't necessarily get that. It doesn't come off the same as
Yes, it doesn't.
right,
And a lot of times, the men themselves, they're scared of entering female, like nursing, as I said before.
right,
And, you know, they themselves are a little iffy on it. And look at teaching. Teach a fantastic career, yet males shy away from it.
right.
So,
All right, thank you. Is there any other question from any other participants? Thank you, Uncle Conrad, for your question. Does anybody
Bro-
else?
Brother Romeo?
Yes, Uncle Cornell.
Yes. Look here. Well, when I was growing up, I played netball, you know.
Okay.
I played netball in the sense that not as all the girls played it, but they saw us as giving them good practice. We did not follow the rules because we tell them, so we're not into that. You follow the rules because you will be playing the competitive game. But we usually have some serious games with our netball girls at school. And I didn't see it anyway. I think it was more fun.
yeah, but if you really study netball, you know, it has a very feminine lilt or tilt to it. The pivoting and on one foot, and it's a more delicate sport. I don't know. Anybody that playing netball can correct me if I'm wrong. There's something that looks very feminine about netball as compared to like basketball. And I tell the truth, because of the state of our world right now, I think it is best sometimes to keep your boys away from those effeminate things. Pardon me, because we have to work with the context. And the context of raising kids nowadays, you have to be very, very careful. This, by the way, you need, I'm sure you know, but you'll have to get some, because, more than I've even given, because homosexuals are picking up our boys. They're just like a guy used to pick up a girl, hit on a girl, homosexual hit on guys. And that's why it's so important to educate them and to tell them how to deal with all of this and to not make them males too effeminate.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Understand. There is one other question in the chat. This is from Mia. She's asking, could you clarify what you meant about dressing like a male, as in what types of clothing
All
rather,
right.
were you referring to?
All right. The cases that I have had to deal with personally, I mean, male clothes. When you see them, you know they're man clothes. So,
Yes.
you know, the man shorts them, and the big pants and the shirt. And they don't wear makeup. And they do everything like a man. They start, and in most of those cases I'm thinking of, those girls had been molested. So it's like they're rejecting their femininity. They don't want to have anything to do with their womanhood, right? So yeah, real man clothes, you know. It's not just that they wear pants. You have female pants that are female pants, you know, it's a female pants.
Right.
These are men clothes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm always cagey when I see a woman begin to dress too much like a man, a girl, because I would have to look into why you're dressing so much like a male, because a lot of times that indicator of something.
Right, right. Okay. Mia says, thank you. So I believe her question was answered.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I agree with you. I was in Twin Gates Plaza one night, and I saw this girl, and I was saying, I couldn't understand, but she was the way she was walking, and I saw her from there, and I said, "Sir, could you excuse me? Let me open the door." And the lady gave me one piece of cuss out. My gosh, I've never seen it like that before. But you know, when I saw it, I said, "Oh, somebody draw me." I said, "It's one of them girl there."
Yeah.
Give me.
Yes.
Sorry. Any other questions, comments, anything from any other participants?
You want to ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Uncle
I
Cleve.
do have a question as well.
All right, so Auntie Andy, after Uncle Cleve, you can go ahead.
Thanks.
Right. There are families where there is a young girl as one of the children, but most of her siblings are brothers, and she would tend to emulate the actions of her brother and seem to take to male trends rather than female trends. Wouldn't that help to confuse her sexual identity?
All right. You know, this is a big issue because I remember a lady saying, as a little girl, she was just a tomboy. She played with her brother. I did that too. And this becomes so delicate now, and that's why we have to be so discerning. A child who's just a tomboy, you have to not make that child feel something is wrong with them. So while you are trying to shape a child's sexual identity, you also have to be careful because the child could just, as you said, just be like a tomboy, and she's as girl as ever. You know, and so yeah, this thing takes a lot of discernment, a lot of understanding. And let me just say something here, because it struck me. As Jamaicans, we don't have filters. You know, so we don't have filter, right? So we say things, even when we love people, in an unfiltered way. So when we're addressing these issues with our kids, we have to be careful about the language we use. So you have a little girl and she just love to play with her brother them, and I used to shoot marble and all that. You say, "Hey girl, how you go on like boy so? A lesbian you want to turn?" That's us, you know. So that's how we talk. That's how we talk. No, you can't deal with it like that. You can't deal with it. It's kind of unfiltered way, because that's us. That's us. And so there is that category, sir, that we have to discern when a girl just loves to play marbles, loves to climb trees, you know, and she's still so feminine. And that's why I say we have to be so honest in our discussions. Because if we build that kind of openness, we're going to talk about it. You say, you know, you like to do these things, but I know you're a girl at heart, whatever, you know. But we have to discuss it with them in a respectful, kind, and not a destructive manner, so that we keep their sexuality on track in this present age.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Uncle Cleve.
Earlier,
Sir,
can I speak? Yes.
Yes, sure. Go ahead,
Right.
Uncle.
Earlier, you mentioned male nurses, and I happen to had a stint doing some statistics at a particular nursing school. And when I saw, you know, I know a few, I think out of a class of 100 and something, there were about 7 males. But as far as I could see, all of them were.
Looked like he got cut off. But I'm assuming what he said, that all of them were pretty masculine. Yes, because being a male nurse is okay. No, you know what's happening in Jamaica now, though? Everybody has heard that Canada and those countries need male nurses. So our nursing school, more and more males are going to our nursing school because of the opportunity to travel to certain countries to work, right? So they're doing it. But what I'm saying, just think about how Jamaicans think. No, me a Jamaican, you're Jamaican. If your son come and say, "Boy, you know, daddy, he's in third form, fourth form. So, Daddy, you don't feel I want to be a nurse? The average male or even the average female in Jamaica, is you sure? Why don't you think of I would trans theory? Why not be a pharmacist? You think that's how we're going to react. That's just our reality. And when I just left high school, I wanted to go to agricultural school. And my mom look at me and says, only pure tough man and all that go to agricultural school. You can't go agricultural school. As a result, I never went. Because she saw it as a mad thing that you want to take up. So that's how we react to things. Yeah.
Right. Understand. There are a few comments and one question in the chat.
Yes.
We'll read the comments and then Auntie Andrea had a question. I'll allow her to speak and then afterwards I'll say the question that's in the chat. So a comment from YouTube, somebody is saying because the hairstyle is similar to a man's. This was a comment made earlier when we were talking about the dressing. Girls wanting to wear men's clothes, boys' clothes, and we were talking about the hairstyle as well. Another comment is saying that Lisa Hannah grew up in the country and she claimed that she was a tomboy. This was a comment to the thing that said some girls are just tomboy and they are still very
I was too. Yeah.
right. So I am going to allow Auntie Andrea Dawes to go ahead with her question and then I'll read the question, next question that's in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Romeo. Thank you, Dr. Brown. I'm not sure I know how to phrase my question, but I feel like I must try. I think we came on, I feel like we came on assuming that everyone, even in the church space, understands the best ways to manage these issues that we're faced with in our current situation. And I would love to leave the chat feeling like we have framed some kind of way to be, because I would be left right now feeling that we actually don't understand the youth who are faced with the feelings, the feelings of confusion, the feelings that where they're being pressed, perhaps the ones who have been tomboys in a space, or guys who are a little bit less loving the, maybe the things we would consider are more masculine. I'm thinking that as church, and because let me just tell you, I'm sort of youth facing. I'm not responsible for the youth ministry, but that has always been my space, to be kind of youth facing. And so I felt that there's a gap in where we are now. And I'm wondering, how do we equip ourselves to guide, especially the youth, because they're older people that manifest with problems of knowing their identities. But this whole identity issue, where they have been raised in an affirming space, and we know some things that they might not know about what God feels about the gender issues. And so I would love to know, where do we go as a church, or how do we as a church formulate something that's a strong answer to the social challenge, but a loving space where we can issue our individual ones who might have the challenge, so that they would even feel comfortable to tell us that their situation is what it is, and that we would figure out God's way to get them from their danger zone that we are sometimes, the way we feel about it, to safety. is there a program kind of
Okay.
approach? Yeah. So I
Yes,
think,
I
okay, I won't
tell you,
prolong the question, but I
what
think you understand
you
what I mean.
have asked is so huge. You know, one thing I tell church, I tell my church, your church, is that we need to make a list of every single possible point of intervention in this issue. So I touch a little at like when you're shaping your child's life, right? But you're raising the issue of confronting it. I hope I understood you. Confront it when it comes into your church. So I shared that incident when this lady who's a church lady, grew up in church, called me and said, my son said I'm a homosexual. I don't know if that's the kind of situation you are talking about. I hope I'm understanding you. Just to clarify.
Yeah, yes, and I feel
Okay.
like we did anecdotes, but no,
All
we
right.
weren't tracking
Well,
towards
guess
a
what?
solution. Yeah,
Yes, well, I tell you
a
something.
way.
The solution is what I gave her. One, I hate to have to tell you, but prayer is number one. That's what I told her, prayer. Two, I told her, listen, please do not push the child away, right? If the child's parents come to the church, you have to tell them, don't push the child away. Do not cut off the child. Do not let the child suddenly feel like they're outsiders in their family. You have to continue to show love, right? And I mentioned also it's very difficult for the fathers to do this, but we have to do it. So we have to keep them in the space. We have to pray. Now listen, beyond that, the only thing you can do is continue to counsel them along biblical lines. If you're coming from my kind of theological space, you might be talking about deliverance. Your theological space and my theological space are two different things. So we might inject there the whole notion of praying about deliverance for the child. Maybe if we discern that this is a necessary thing. Right. Let me just add something to this whole thing right here. That one of the puzzles I have right now is how to deal with addiction across the board. Not just this thing you just mentioned, not just this, I forget the name of the lady, not just the thing you just mentioned, but I'm dealing with compulsive liars. Sorry about that, right? I'm dealing with compulsive liars. I'm dealing with people with sexual addictions. I'm dealing with all different forms of compulsion. And so it's not just what you just mentioned, not just what we are here to discuss. Believe it or not, today my biggest prayer item to God, how do we deal with all of this whole range of stuff, which seem to be so trenchant, so deeply rooted in some people's lives? How do we deal with it? How do we deal with this homosexual child? Well, I'll tell you, the anecdote I gave you, and the lady I worked with, the last time I spoke to her, she said the child had begun to emerge from the issue. So it means that the counsel that was given was correct. They remained included the person in the family. They didn't push the person. They prayed, they sought God, and they gently counseled. And that managed to eventually turn the child back towards the norms that we're used to. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's going to work so easily for every single person, but what I've said is what we have to do. The only other thing I can inject, as I said, if your theological space allows, is where God discerned, says there's any kind of demonic activity to deal with that. And one of the things we inject to, I forgot to mention this, my daughter happens to be a psychiatrist. So, we have a lot of discussions about the spiritual versus the psychiatric. So when it comes to compulsive things, so some sexuality stuff are compulsive, right? And I personally believe in allowing the child to get skilled counseling. So I would not put forward myself as a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a pastor. But I would allow that individual who is troubled in that way to get skilled counseling. What the counselor can do, they can dig right down into the root of the person's life, and they might be able to get them to see why they have made that choice. And so, yes, I'd inject it. So that's a whole range of interventions that I would put on a case like that. Prayer, number one, if your space allows, and if God says this is the case, deliverance, psychological or psychiatric intervention, and counseling, and of course, a family that does not reject the child, and the church. This one is hard. A church that does not reject the child. I'm sure some of you might have some other interventions that you can put in. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you. It was helpful. It took me
Yes.
further than where we were
And I'm
before.
sure,
Thank you.
I'm sure there are many other things, because this is not a narrow problem, it's a wide problem, different cases. I went to a church recently and I saw a guy dressed in a dress. This young man dressed in a dress with beard. I said, oh my God. I don't want to tell you what I said next. I said, boy, I'm glad it's not my church. Because the pastor has to deal with that. So this is what we're dealing with now. Yes.
All right, thank you. And Auntie Angie, that answers your question. I still have something else in the chat. This is a different question from your first question you had asked.
No, not as an addition,
Yeah.
just to try to frame the question I was asked.
Okay, understand. All right, thank you.
But I do suggest we get together and make a list of interventions, a new problem for the church, and we have to get used to it, and how we can have something that our church might know. I need to learn from them. And so we're all in a learning mode right now.
Right, absolutely. All right, so there are two more questions in the chat, two comments. This is about the comment about farming earlier. We know how women in agriculture, we do have women in agriculture.
We do. In my old time days, I'm 67 years old, so in my old time days, my mother never see it as something a girl should take up. So,
Right.
Of course, we have women in agriculture.
Right.
So,
Right. And another comment says champion farmers. So the women in agriculture are often champion
Of
farmers.
course.
Right.
Of course.
All right. So two more questions. The first, all right. So what about families where one of the adult is missing? How does a man grow a girl or
Oh,
a
geez, man.
boy?
I tell you, you're going to pull my heartstring now, because, well, you're talking about when the mom is missing. But basically, we live in a fatherless society. And that's one part of what God had intended, gone out of the equation. All right. Now, you say, how does a man raise a girl?
How does a man grow a girl, or how does a woman?
Well, it's not easy. I've seen it done. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done badly. I think you're posing that question to somebody who would not pretend to be an expert on it. I think that is best put to a man who has actually done it. I've seen a case where it was done very badly. The children were sexually molested. I've seen other cases was done very well. So, but as to answering that question, I would not pretend to you that I can. But we know it's if it has to happen, it has to happen. Just one thing I might put forward here is, if the person is in a church context, the church should help to play a role in that. If the man has extended family who are female, they should assist in the raising of the child. Right now, I've put to my church that no child in our church should be fatherless in the strictest sense of the word, that the men need to step up and play a father role to the fatherless child. So I guess it will be the same thing on the other side of the equation.
Right. Other people should step forward and
Yes, step up and help. Because women are delicate creatures, and we do need a feminine input. Believe me, we do.
Right. So there has to be a balance.
Yes, I value my womanhood in this age when womanhood is being attacked by the wicked foe. I really value my womanhood, and women need women. So
Right. Absolutely. All right. Two more questions. So, would you hire a male babysitter or a male housekeeper or a day's work?
no. No, friends, you have to be careful who comes into your house. Listen, one of the things, some of the cases I'm sharing, I've seen. I see people leave their little girl with their teenage son. How can you leave your little girl with your teenage son to babysit? I'm sorry. Those are things I say no to. Because you see, what you're doing, you're tempting, you're putting your teenage son in danger because you're opening up temptation to that child. You don't know if the child has gone on pornography and feels sexually driven, and then you're leaving your little 3-year-old girl with your son. No, I do not. I still believe women are better nurturers, more careful nurturers, and safer nurturers. It does not mean you don't have women who are sexual molesters as well. You do it, you have them. But I think on the whole, they are better, they're safer for your children. At the same time, you have to vet them carefully. Right? Vet them carefully, right?
Right, absolutely.
Mm-mm.
Here's one more question here. What advice would you give to a youth that is struggling with identity issues?
It depends on the age of the youth. I don't know if they want to give me an age.
Regular, because I don't think regular age, like a teenager, so about like
Teenager.
what? Yeah, 13.
Well, I think the same thing I told the lady earlier. I think all the range of interventions I mentioned, counseling, meeting with a counselor in terms of psychologists or psychiatrists, trying to get to the root of why do you feel like you feel, right? Prayer, really serious prayer. Pastoral counseling too, to look at the spiritual aspects of what the child is going through. And also, the family has to be examined to see what's operating in that family, and how do they handle the situation, because sometimes we make situation worse by how we choose to handle it. So we handle it in such a poor manner that we make it worse rather than better. As I mentioned before, we don't fear to drive them out, Come out of my house. We don't want to hear. And that's how we are. That's how we are. We have to face it. And so we often make our family matters worse because we're so dramatic and we have no filter. So we have to teach our people how to handle these things.
Right.
And our church. Because our church, we chat and we handle it badly as well. Before you know it, me here say, you have a problem, but not worrying, my dear. We are praying for you. Me here say, that's how we do it, We don't know there's certain things you don't even mention to the person, so.
Right.
Yes.
The advice really is to seek professional help.
Yes, man.
Different aspects.
Yes.
Psychological aspect.
It's a multi-dimensional intervention.
Right. Understand. Hope that answers your question. Not seeing any other questions in the chat far. Are there anybody else who has any questions based on what we have been discussing so far? Anything anybody would like any clarification on? Anything you want to know about? Uncle John, I see your mic open. I'm not sure if you want to ask a question. All right, so I don't think we have any other questions so far. Well, for now. So yeah, that should be it for the questions, Reverend Helen. I'm not sure if this is the end of your presentation.
It is the end of my presentation.
Okay.
As I said, this is an ongoing, open discussion that the church needs to be having.
Right.
And so I'm not saying it has been exhaustive. I'm not saying I've covered everything. Because we're all in a mode of self-discovery as well. We're trying to work with this issue. So, and it's new.
Right. Understand. So there's some final remarks just to wrap up session, just to summarize all of what would have been, shared earlier, and just some key takeaways of what we should leave this session with knowing as it relates to sensitizing, as the topics of sensitizing the children about their sexuality and I
So,
don't.
so you're asking me to give the wrap up?
Yeah, man, just
All right, just very quickly, that
right.
it begins from early. One, that we need to understand our milieu, the cultural milieu, the society, the age of information. And so we have to be countering negative information from the society. We have to begin earlier. We have to become more honest with our kids and really give them clear information. And we have to be very, very attuned to what's happening to them. We have to be more intentional from early in helping them to develop their sexual identity.
Right.
And we have to be more observant as they grow, both in the church context and the family's context, in order that we can raise the type of children we want. We have to stay in touch with each other's churches and develop some kind of protocol to help us to deal with a very new and nuanced issue. And we have to tell our government, don't try certain things, because we want to keep men as men, women as women, and our children raised in this society where everything is clear.
Amen. Amen.
Mm.
No confusion.
No confusion.
Back to the scripture you made reference to in Genesis. God
Yes.
created male and female, he created them. So there should be no form of confusion if we
No
are
confusion. God didn't have any.
according to the word of God. And the word of God also reminds us that God is not a God of confusion.
Confusion. But just one last sentence. The fact that when this issue first started globally, people are being asked to define woman and what's a woman. They couldn't. The truth is they have finally understood that the X chromosome, the chromosomes are in every cell of the human body that define men and women. It's not just one place. Every single cell is coded with either your XX or your XY chromosome. Men can never be women and women can never be men. And that needs to be very clear. It's clear in science and it's clear in the Bible.
Amen.
Mhm.
Praise the Lord. I know God's truth never changes. So once it is written,
No, it is
so,
written.
right.
It's written.
So it is, and so it will always be.
Yes.
Amen. Praise the Lord. I want to thank you, Reverend Brown, for
My
coming.
pleasure. My
Yes.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Yes, it has been a wonderful discussion, a well-needed discussion also. And I pray that the persons who are here and have been listening will leave now more informed as it relates to how to handle certain situations as it relates to sensitizing children about their sexuality and their identity, how we need to approach it. We don't need to be, as we need to have a filter, not be too quick to judge or cast away, but by, helping them to get professional help and, counseling and prayer. And just to show them that they are still loved regardless, and just hopefully they will, come back to what they should be. Amen. Praise the Lord. So thank you very much again, Reverend
You
Brown.
are beyond welcome, and may God richly bless you and your church.
Yes, and we appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, and I assume there are no other questions for Mr. Reverend Brown. I see here one comment that Auntie Paula is looking forward to us having a part two of this discussion on a Friday night at Youth Fellowship meeting. That can definitely be slotted in for one of these Friday evenings meeting, because this topic is a very, very important topic that definitely needs to be had. All right, so thank you all very much once more for joining on. I believe this is where we would conclude and just wrap up all for this evening. I'll just play Uncle Cleve. If you have any songs on cue, you can just play a song. Play a song. I'll ask and initially when we started, I asked if there is anybody who has anything they'd like to share, any testimonies, anything they'd like to share about what God is doing in their life. I started by saying also that we're made known that we should be in prayer for Sister Iris Lee, who due to a car accident earlier this week had lost some family members. One family member died, and I believe one is in the hospital. So we are reminded to be in prayer for Sister Iris Lee and her family. Uncle Cleve, if you have a song, you can just go ahead and play, and then afterwards you open the floor if there's anybody who would like to share, and then after, if there's nobody, we will have some announcements if there are any announcements, and then we'll just pray to close off.
Okay, thank you. Just to let our folks on YouTube be aware that our song is not for them, so unfortunately we have to say good night to them at this point in time.
All right, so to all the persons who have joined us on YouTube, thank you for joining, and